Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Bloody Jacob here to bring you another review. This time I'm going to be going a little bit out of the ordinary as far as my reviews go. I'm going to be reviewing not a horror film, but a superhero comic book film. And this is also a couple months too late. It came out back in the very beginning of May of this year. And before I get into that, though, I just want to say I usually don't do reviews that don't relate to like horror or anything like that. I believe the last like movie review that wasn't a horror movie was probably Godzilla. And the last review of anything non-horror was probably my Game of Thrones season 4 finale review. So there aren't many movies you'll see me review that aren't horror, but once in a while I see one that I still really want to talk about. And so yeah, let's get into it. It's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And of course I had seen the first one, and I thought that was a pretty solid movie. It was definitely better than the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3, and probably right on par with the original movie in my opinion. I like the original Tobey Maguire movie a lot. So I was I haven't I was a little late seeing the second one, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I usually do a pretty good job of keeping up with the Marvel movies, especially. So I knew I was gonna see it eventually, but I didn't expect it to be this good. So yeah, right off the bat, I'll say I really, really like the movie. I'm not gonna go over everything from scene to scene in the movie, but since it's like over 2 hours, I don't really want to spend that much time on it. But it'd just be way too much to talk about. Yeah, in fact, the running time was 142 minutes. So that's, like almost 220 minutes, a little more actually. So, yeah, I'm sorry if I'm doing the math wrong. I'm not a whiz with that kind of shit. But anyway, so yeah, that's the one little thing that might be a little wrong with the movie. It did feel a little bit long part of the way through, but I don't really think it's a huge problem because most of it was worth it, in my opinion. But so at the end of the first one, I'm just gonna be going over like certain parts of the plot, not like the whole thing. So at the end of the first one, we know that Gwen's father, made Peter promise that he would, keep Gwen away from him, or don't, let Gwen be a part of it. Is basically what he said. Because of what he's doing, he's gonna have enemies, and they're gonna go after Gwen because of how much she means to him and things like that. And of course, Peter broke up with her at the end of the first one. Even though as much as he didn't want to, he knew it was probably the right thing in the back of his mind as well. But then we also got a hint that they're gonna be getting back together anyway. So that's like a big part of this movie. We see him kind of going off and on a little bit. Gwen and Peter, I mean, and for the most part, they're together in the movie. Though they're just saying, "Oh, we can do this," because we love each other and things like that. And Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone in this movie are just great. I mean, they have a great chemistry. They just really click much more than the Kirsten Dunst and the Tobey Maguire and the original trilogy. They just have this immediate connection, and yeah, it's just really, really, really shows through in the series and this movie especially. So, and I guess Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are dating in real life as well. I mean, I'm not sure if they still are. I think so, but if they're not, I apologize. But yeah, so maybe their real life chemistry with each other kind of rubbed off in a very positive way on screen. I think it showed. I think it showed you guys. Emma Stone is a great actress as well. I loved Zombieland. She was in that a few years ago, and so she can pull off comedy, and I hear she was good in Easy A as well. But she can pull off comedy really well, and she really handles the drama exceptionally too. So, and Garfield as Peter Parker, I know a lot of people say, oh, he should be more awkward and, quiet as Peter and things like that, but he sort of was in the first one. And I do admit I sort of miss, like, the part of Tobey Maguire's acting in the role, that quiet, awkward charm he had and things like that they were going for with him. But I really think Garfield has just made Peter Parker and Spider-Man his own, and he just really brings the great acting to the role, I think. So there's that, and let's see. We also had Jamie Foxx as Electro, of course, and Electro in this movie, I don't know, I guess he's what I call a special effects supervillain. And what I mean by that, yes, this movie's meant to be visually appealing. It's meant to be over the top action and things like that. But I wasn't really a fan of. I'm not a huge fan of Electro in the comics, and I wasn't really a huge fan of Jamie Foxx as Electro or Electro in general in this movie. I mean, I don't think Jamie Foxx necessarily did a bad job in the role. I just don't really find the Electro character that interesting in the movie. So that's probably already because I wasn't a fan of the character in the first place, but I mean, it's the fight with him and Spider-Man is fun to watch. It's visually appealing, it's visually entertaining, but I just wasn't too into the character. Sorry, guys. Anyway, and we also had Dane. I can't pronounce his name, but the guy who played the Green Goblin, Harry Osborn. I wasn't so sure about him at first. I mean, I actually did like James Franco as Harry Osborn in the original trilogy, but as the movie went on, I got more and more into Dehan. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, man, but I got more and more into him and the role as the movie went on. And another little problem I have with the movie is, they just Peter sort of just goes to Harry to talk to him, and like all of a sudden we find out they were best friends years ago. So it feels a little random with the way they introduce their whole friendship, but then they talk a lot about what Spider-Man actually means to the city, and then Peter tells him about Gwen and things like that. And also they kind of discuss the secrets that Peter's parents had left behind and things like that. So, I really like those scenes. Those scenes are pretty good. So yeah, I eventually kind of not really embraced, but I kind of accepted him as the Green Goblin and Harry Osborn as it went on. So he turned out to be okay in the movie. And speaking of Peter's parents, that's another big focus in the movie. We find out more about what happened to Peter's original biological parents, and we had only picked up hints of it in the first one. With us just knowing that they left him behind at Aunt May and Uncle Ben's. In fact, the movie starts off with a flashback to Peter's dad and his mother on a plane, and we see he's trying to send information. This guy shows up. He kills a pilot. Then he tries to kill Peter's father, and they fight a little bit on the plane. But things going down when the guy grabs a parachute. And it was a really, really well done scene, I think. I mean, I really like the actor they had playing Peter's father. Apparently his name, is Campbell Scott. They did a really good job in this actual scene, as well as the recorded videos we see Peter eventually view. So, of course, he played Richard Parker, and Beth Davids. Again, I might be mispronouncing her name, but she played Mary Parker. Peter's mother. She did pretty well as well, and I actually like those scenes. And I actually felt a little bit a little smidgen of emotion when I was watching that opening scene of that plane crashing and things like that. And we basically find out later in the movie that that um, Peter's dad was connected to Oscorp. We kind of knew that in the first movie, but we find out he worked with Norman Osborn, Harry's dad. And I'll get to Norman Osborn in a second, but we find out they worked together for a while, and that then eventually they're planning on using their creation to make biological weapons, and some of his DNA was in it and things like that, and that's what kind of created those spiders. So we find out that Peter's dad is a lot more directly involved with Peter becoming Spider-Man than he would at first think. So that was pretty interesting to find out. We just find out a lot more about the corruption of Norman Osborn, just Oscorp as a whole. So yeah, that part was pretty revealing. I thought it was nice that I finally found out more details about it. And Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn. We don't see much of Norman Osborn in this movie. When we see him, it's in that flashback I told you about, and it's when Harry comes to him and he's dying in bed with this green skin disease that he has and things like that. So he dies pretty quickly, and so right away he played the role pretty good too for those few minutes he was in it, though. Chris Cooper did, and so I was a little it's a little disappointing to see Norman Osborn die like that and not do anything as the Green Goblin, but we'll see more on that later. And let's see, there are other things I want to touch on before I get to other things. We've seen some short appearances by Rhino. Of course, if you're a Spider-Man fan, you know who Rhino is. When Peter takes him out, and he's just like a regular thug in the movie, and eventually he's brought in at the end, but we'll get to that in a little bit again, I guess. And we also get a girl named Felicia in the movie, which is, of course, is a nod to Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat. So I'm not sure if they're going to be using the same actress if they have her appear in other future installments, but I admit I got pretty excited when I heard Harry call her Felicia. I guess she's working at Oscorp. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see if they bring in Felicia Hardy into the series whenever they put out the next installment. So yeah, I kind of geeked out. I was like, ooh, that's pretty close to the sound I made when he said Felicia. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And we got a lot of little nods and references or foreshadowings to potential upcoming villains in the series. Not to say that Felicia Hardy's a villain, but just other major characters they could be bringing in. You know what I mean? And I might get to more of that in a minute. But let's see. Oh yeah, and like I said, a lot of the movies focused on Peter and Gwen's relationship. Gwen is finally getting this scholarship to a school in England, and so she's planning on leaving because it is an exciting opportunity and things like that. And Peter's still struggling with to stay with her or not. Eventually he decides that, I'm gonna follow you everywhere. I'm sure they have crime in England and things like that. So they're all happy and things like that, but eventually it's all kind of brought down in a pretty major way. But before we get to that, we also see Harry gets kind of screwed by the other guys working at Oscorp. And I really don't blame Harry for going after these guys he was working with, in all honesty. So he kills most of those guys, and with Electro's help, of course, after Spider-Man had defeated him. And Harry had also wanted Spider-Man to give him his blood because he believed, after watching his father and Peter's father's work, he believed that would be the cure to disease his father passed down to him. But it didn't really, it kind of backfired on him. Kind of turned him into more of a goblin type of thing. But just really altered his face and his hair a lot. But we'll get to that a little bit more in a minute. And then we see a big battle, another big battle between Spider-Man, Peter and Electro, and like I said before, I don't really like Electro too much in this movie. I mean, Jamie Foxx was kind of funny at first before he turned into Electro, but when he did, it was sort of just meh. You know what I mean? But again, as I said before, that's probably because I'm not that interested in the character in general anyway. So, he was serviceable in the movie though, and we got another big battle towards the end. You know, eventually Spider-Man defeats him again, and that's when Harry shows up as the Green Goblin, and a lot of people, I've heard mixed things about how the Green Goblin looks in this movie. I think it's an improvement over the original Sam Raimi trilogy, over the original Raimi trilogy. Instead of like that full suit with a helmet and things like that, but William Dafoe still looking normal. I think it was a better choice to actually make his face actually mutated and actually, get some of those familiar designs of the Green Goblin on him instead of just wearing like a suit that's actually not a part of him at all. So, I actually think the Green Goblin, Harry Osborn, looked pretty good in this movie. But, so you see him eventually show up, and, of course, Gwen's there with Spider-Man because she wanted to help, and things like that. So Harry picks up Gwen, and, he basically drops her, but, Peter catches her a couple times, but, the Goblin keeps on, screwing him up, and he drops her again, but he keeps on pulling her back up with the webbing and things like that as they're falling through this building. And it's a really, really cool scene, too. Some really good shots and things like that. And, eventually the web is broken and Gwen falls. But, Peter manages to subdue Harry, and he shoots out one last webbing towards Gwen, and, he gets it to her in time, but when he gets to her, her body snaps back. And so I don't know if her neck snapped or if her head slightly hit the ground. That's been debated by quite a few fans, but it looked more like a whiplash and then her neck snapped or something like that. So, of course I know that, about that story point in the comic books. If you're a big Spider-Man fan, you'll probably have known about that in the comics. And so I was wondering if they're going to do that in this movie. I knew about the storyline, of course, so I knew about the possibility. I was aware that they could do it, but I wasn't sure if they're going to pull the trigger in the movie, you know what I mean? Because I'm sure some non-comic book fans, probably don't really think they're going to kill off the main female love interest in a superhero movie like this, if you're not a big comic book fan. But, so I imagine this is really unexpected for some people. And even I was, sort of, thinking, oh, yeah, they could do it if they bring in that part of the story from the comics. So I was, half expecting it. But, like I said, I wasn't sure if they're going to actually do it. But they did it. They did it. Gwen dies, and, Peter fails to save her, or he might have actually killed her himself, with that whiplash, I don't know. But, man. I don't remember the last time I got so emotional about any characters in a superhero comic book movie before. Really, I admit I shed a tear when Gwen died. And Peter's just completely broke and distraught over her. And I admit I shed a tear. I got kind of emotional. And, just really, I don't remember the last time you could get really this emotional or this much emotion out of a superhero movie. So, just incredible acting on part of Andrew Garfield here. And, of course, we see him at Gwen's funeral sometime later. And, you see Aunt May trying to comfort him. But, he's just, sort of, she just sort of leaves him alone. And, another thing about Aunt May, she's the one that eventually let Peter know more of the truth about his father and things like that. But she didn't want him to know not everything necessarily, because she felt like he was her own after all these years of raising him. But anyway, so we see Peter at the funeral, and it's just some really, really well done, scenes with, showing that they show the changing seasons. It goes from where they started to, then it goes into the winter and things like that. It shows like months had passed by. He constantly visited her gravesite and things like that. So, yeah, it's really sad. Like I said, I shed a tear. Just great acting on the part of Andrew Garfield, and you really feel for Peter in these scenes. So, and we also find out that he gave up being Spider-Man after all that, because he failed Gwen. He lost the love of his life, but he also failed her father as well, because this is the ultimate price of keeping her in his life. She died because of being involved with him and the people who are after him. So, yeah, you can just imagine all that on him. So, yeah, that was some really, really upsetting stuff, but some really well done stuff at the same time. So, yeah, I was upset, but at the same time I'm glad they did it. I thought it added a lot to the story, it added a lot of depth, a lot of extra relatable emotion, and just made the movie all that much better. It made the movie to me, this happening. As sad as it was, it really did. So, we see Peter giving up being Spider-Man because of failing Gwen and her father and all that. And then we eventually see that guy, with the coat and the hat, we've seen at the end of the first one. And, I believe his name is, let's see. Yeah, I guess this guy's name is Gustav Fiers, or I guess he's the guy we've been seeing at the end of the Spider-Man movies lately. I don't know much about him. I think he's supposed to be a character from the comic book. I could be wrong. But he visits Harry where he's being held, and Harry's transformation has subsided a little bit. But he says it comes and goes, and the guy visits him, and he basically tells him about what they're planning on doing. It's basically build up to the Sinister Six, in my opinion. That's kind of obvious. And then we see that guy that Peter went after earlier, the thug, it's the Rhino. He gets in this mechanized suit of the Rhino, and he starts, rampaging through the streets and things like that. And, this reminds me a lot more of the Ultimate version of the Rhino from the comic books. Not the more traditional, just big guy in a bodysuit. It's just like a mechanical robot the guy's in, with guns and missiles and things like that. But he can also move the suit and, charge like the Rhino too. So yeah, it's definitely based on the Ultimate version, the Ultimate Universe. And, I sort of like the more traditional, old school version of the Rhino a little bit more. But, I'm still glad they brought him in. It's really cool. And, another really cool thing is when we've seen the guy visiting Harry, we see him walk past all these different things. And, we see, like, Dr. Octopus's, mechanized, arms. And we've seen, like, the Vulture's wings. It was just really cool. We're getting some nods and foreshadowing to likely future villains in the series. So, and of course, lead up to the Sinister Six movie. So yeah, that was some really good nods and foreshadowings there. And you see this little boy that Peter had met earlier in the movie, or that Spider-Man had met anyway, that was being picked on and bullied, but Spider-Man rescued him. Walked home with him and things like that, which was actually a kind of a touching scene too. Kind of a charming, fun scene. And, this same little boy steps up, he's in a little Spider-Man costume, and he actually walks into the street and stands in front of the Rhino in the little Spider-Man costume and the mask and everything like that. But then, we see Peter, he's listening to Gwen's graduation speech that he missed, because, we did see their high school graduation, I forgot to mention that. But he listens to Gwen's graduation speech, about hope and, just holding on even after the darkest of things happen. And so Peter just gets inspired by that again. Gwen inspires him even after her death, and he suits up again basically, and he goes after what he hears in the streets, and you see him confronting the Rhino, making fun of him a little bit, and thanking that boy for being so brave. And then him and the Rhino basically charge at each other, and we get a couple good shots of Peter avoiding some of the missiles he fires, and then right as they're about to collide, the screen goes to black. So yeah, there's no after credits scene either, which is a little surprising, but there isn't, so you don't have to wait for that or fast forward to it or anything like that. But yeah, so I think I went over most of the parts of the story I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I really think it was a great movie, man. And by far, I will say it was by far the best Spider-Man movie I've ever seen. It was better than the first one in this series, and also a lot better than any of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies as well. So by far the best Spider-Man movie so far, in my opinion. And one of the best superhero movies I've seen in a long time as well. One of the best comic book movies I've seen in a while. It's right up there with The Dark Knight and those Christian Bale Batman films. It's right up there with that. Personally, I enjoyed this one more than Thor: The Dark World and Captain America and Iron Man and things like that. I think this Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a hell of a lot better than any of those. And probably a lot better as far as characters go than the Avengers as well. So I'm just a lot more invested in the characters we see in Spider-Man than I am in the Avengers, as cool as it is seeing them being brought together. It's always still a shame, since the whole Sony Pictures and Marvel problems, with the rights and things like that. I feel like we would see Spider-Man brought into the Avengers in the movies, but, because of all that, they can't. That would be really cool, though, but, again, the characters are a lot more emotionally interesting in this movie than the Avengers, so yeah, by far one of the best Spider-Man and comic book movies I've seen in general for a long time. Just a great superhero movie, a great movie in general. And yeah, I know the Amazing Spider-Man 3 is official, and so is the fourth one, but they've both been delayed or pushed back for a while, because I guess the Amazing Spider-Man 3 was originally going to come out in 2016, but they pushed it back to an unspecified date in 2018. And because of that, of course, Amazing Spider-Man 4 is also pushed back to after 2018. So yeah, it's really a shame. Some people are worried that they're not going to happen, but we are getting like a Sinister Six movie spin-off, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see what they do with a Sinister Six spin-off. I'm not sure how much Spider-Man will be involved in that, but we'll see how that works. It could still be pretty good, and I look forward to a potential Venom movie down the road as well. That could be really good as well. And so as long as we still get these Amazing Spider-Man movies eventually, and even in 2018, it's a long wait, but Godzilla 2 is coming out in 2018 as well, so as long as we get them, I'm not complaining. And so yeah, I definitely look forward to the Amazing Spider-Man 3 and any other work they do with this Andrew Garfield and Marc Webb Spider-Man universe. Marc Webb was a great director for this one as well. Yeah, he did another really solid job with this, and yeah, so I look forward to any other future installments of the Amazing Spider-Man series. And yeah, so like I said, overall, great movie, great ending with the whole Gwen thing, really emotional and really all around well done. Yes, it felt a little jumbled with all the villains in there, and Jamie Foxx and Elektra were a little bit lacking, but overall great action, great exciting action, great chemistry between Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield and the characters of Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. And yeah, and oh yeah, by the way, the Spider-Man costume in this is spot on, like the most dead-on costume to any comic book hero I've seen. So just great all around. Overall, best superhero movie I've seen in a long time. Better than most of them I've seen, actually. So yeah, I'll catch you guys next time, most likely for my weekly Strain review. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little change of pace in my reviews. And yeah, it's a great movie. And peace.